Hello and welcome back to my channel. I am Just Three Possums, and here on my channel I talk about whatever I want to, and today I want to talk about bog bodies. But before I start talking, if I am slurring my words more than usual, I am very sorry. I just had two of my wisdom teeth removed, so I'm still a bit swollen, which is why I might sound a little more off than typical. With that little disclaimer out of the way, let's start talking about bodies and bogs. So, bog bodies. Quite exciting. They are archaeological finds spanning all over the globe as bogs preserve the dead and provide so much insight into history. I have a collection of a couple of bog bodies here, and today's first bog body is known as the Eid Girl. The Eid or Yeed, it is spelled with a Y, but Eid feels better to pronounce and sounds more right, so that's what I'm gonna go with. The Eid Girl was found on May 12th in 1897 by two laborers in a small bog south of the village of Eid, hence the name. The bog body surfaced when they were extracting peat. The body and its associated remains were hidden underneath heath sods for over a week before they were retrieved by the village mayor and a representative of the Provincial Museum of Durance. In the meantime, villagers had unfortunately caused significant damage to the find as nothing was taped off, so spectators were free to just wander about. The remains that were found belonged to an approximately 16-year-old girl with long hair, the right half of which was supposedly or possibly cut off. She was dressed in a heavily worn woolen cloak. A braided woolen cord sprang with a sliding knot around her neck was probably used to strangle her. It is also very probable that she was stabbed in the neck with a knife. Alongside these wounds, the girl had scoliosis, which was so severe that she likely walked with a limp. Now, based on sea dating or carbon dating, she lived around the transition phase from the late Iron Age to the early Roman period. Topographic maps from the discovery show many T-shaped and right-angled peat reclamation pits spread across a large heath area. This suggests a disorganized pattern of land use, likely meeting local needs. So, simply put, they found what appeared to be a bunch of T-shaped and right-angled buildings or other sort of structures that stood there to meet local needs, possibly acting as some sort of marketplace. While her cause of death is known, her manner of death is not. Some think that she was executed, while others say she was sacrificed. Both of these theories rely on, one, her cause of death, but also on half of her hair having been shaved off, a detail that is also contested. Historians believe that the missing hair may have been pulled out by villagers, or that one half of her head was simply exposed to more oxygen than the other, leading to the deterioration of the hair on that half. Although most articles I could find still seem to lean more toward the idea that her hair was cut before or at her time of death. Either the shaving of half of her head was some form of punishment, something that has been used to humiliate adulterous women in the Iron Age, or half of her head was shaved as a part of a ritual in preparation for sacrifice. I personally, not as a expert, but as someone who does a lot of research into the burial rituals of the Iron to Medieval Age, lean towards her death being a result of some form of human sacrifice. She lived during the Celtic era, and it would appear that human sacrifice featured a prominent role in their religious practices. She also had a lack of defensive wounds or any struggle during her death, as expected in execution, and she was not buried in a way different from other bodies found in the area, something that you would not typically see if it was the body of a criminal. That is currently all of the information we have on her. Like I said, it's very hard to get a lot of insight from the Eid girl's body, simply because villagers were allowed to disturb her remains, so we lost a lot of valuable insight that we could have had if she had simply remained in situ, which is unfortunately a theme of Bog Bodies. Bog Body number 2 for the day is called the Gallig Man. 'Twas 1821 when members of the O'Kelly family discovered, as they dug turf near their home at Gallig in Galway, the remains of a dead body. The O'Kellys, and I will... Hold on, my cat's calling. Okay, sorry about that. Someone was feeling a little left out. As I was saying, the O'Kellys, and I will be judging them just a tad for this, not only saw an amazing opportunity to study the past, but also saw an opportunity to, of course, make money. So, they decided that they would rebury the bog body and then charge visitors a small fee to excavate and view it. The family would have tourists excavate the body and then they would rebury it for about 9 years, meaning that we lost a lot of valuable knowledge that could have been gained from the body remaining in situ. Because they wanted to make money. Gotta love capitalism. Eventually, in 1829, the Royal Irish Academy, there we go, finally intervened and purchased the human remains, which were subsequently preserved. The remains date to around 470 to 120 BCE. The man was around 6 feet tall and 25 years old at the time of death. The presence of a withy hoop, or a rope made from twisted willow twigs, found wrapped around his throat indicates that he was likely strangled, similarly to the Eid girl, either as a method of execution or sacrifice. This again will become a theme. The withy hoop found around his neck may have originally been part of a spancel used for restraining animals. Now, I and most historians believe he was most likely sacrificed because of the willow rope, which often appears for the purpose in early Irish mythological stories as an important plant. Thus, a lot of other sacrifices have been found with willow ropes in them, or, well, a lot of other believed sacrifices. We'll never know for sure. Anyways, that is all I have on him. For Bog Body number 3, we have the Girl of Moor, also called Mora. Back in the year 2000, peat harvesters near Uche, Germany, found pieces of human bone and tissue stuck in the harvesting machine. Later, they would also find a perfectly mummified hand. The naked remains were identified by forensic scientists to be that of a female in her late teens who lived over 2,500 years ago, at the tail end of the Iron Age, making her the oldest bog body discovered in Germany. She was believed to have been between 16 to 19 years of age at the time of her death. Sadly, the girl's body was roughly hacked apart by accident with the peat harvesting equipment, something that is fairly common with these bodies. Mora had suffered from seasonal malnutrition and had a curvature in her spine that possibly resulted from the weight of a benign tumor at the base of her neck. They also found an assortment of head injuries, which were healed and ruled out as possible causes of death, although this does give some insight as to how she may have lived. Aside from old injuries, there was nothing that researchers could find that would directly implicate foul play. It is believed that she drowned in the bog, and it is fairly suspicious that she was found naked, as that does not line up with the burial rituals practiced at the time of her death. Thus, some think she may have been the victim of an Iron Age murder. Second to last, we have the Old Krogan Man. Old Krogan Man was unearthed in 2003, 3 months after a similar discovery of the Cloneycavan Man was made in County Meath. Despite being incomplete, Old Krogan Man was found to be remarkably well preserved. It was through analysis of his physical remains that researchers concluded that he was a ruler or at least a member of the elite, supported by his well-manicured hands, meaning he likely did not work in any sort of hard labor job. A braided leather armband found on one of his biceps is thought to represent the sun, which is associated with kingship in Ireland. Additionally, it is noted that the armband was decorated in the quote-unquote fashionable continental style, which might indicate links between Ireland and mainland Europe. A chemical analysis performed on his nails found that he had consumed meat regularly for at least 4 months before his death, and in Iron Age Ireland, that's a mouthful, meat was considered to be a luxury. Now, analysis of the contents of Old Krogan Man's stomach found that the last meal he had consisted of cereals and buttermilk. It is speculated that this was a ritual meal, although calling something ritual in archaeology sometimes simply means that they don't know why that thing was done. Old Krogan Man is thought to have been the victim of ritual sacrifice or murder and likely died an extremely violent death. For me, his elite status and method of death hint at a possible political motive. It is thought that Old Krogan Man had been decapitated and cut in half, hence the head and lower half of his body being missing when he was discovered. The remaining parts of Old Krogan Man's body also provide indicators of violence he suffered before his death. On Old Krogan Man's upper arms, there were holes through which a rope of hazel branches was threaded. This may have been done to restrain him before his murder. A defensive wound on his upper left arm suggests that he might have tried to protect himself during the ordeal. Old Krogan Man was also stabbed in the chest and struck in the neck. Moreover, Old Krogan Man's nipples were sliced off, perhaps the most unusual wound on him. This is used as additional support for the interpretation that he had been a king or some form of noble ruler. According to proponents of this interpretation, in ancient Ireland, the king's nipples symbolized the life-giving sun, and that sucking on a king's nipples was a sign of submission. Apparently. It seems weird by modern standards, but who knows. Therefore, the act of slicing off a king's nipples could be regarded as a means of ritually decommissioning or overthrowing a king. Now we will move on to our final bog body of the day. Our final bog body was originally known as the Windebbie Girl, but is now called Windebbie 1. This is a bog body that was discovered in a peat bog located in the town of Windebbie in the northern part of Germany. This bog body was discovered in the middle of the 20th century when peat from a bog was being cut by locals. Initially, the bog body was dubbed as the Windebbie Girl, as it was believed that the body belonged to a 14-year-old female. In more recent times, however, this designation has been reassessed, and it is now agreed that these are the mummified remains of a male individual. Hence, he was renamed Windebbie 1. There were no grave goods found with Windebbie 1, apart from a woolen band covering the eyes and a collar around the neck. It has been suggested that the woolen band had either been used to cover the corpse's eyes after death or to hold the hair back, in which case the band would have slipped down over the eyes due to the shrinkage of the body. Based on the body's slender build, it was initially assumed that it belonged to a female. Another important aspect of this body is that it seemed to have his head partly shaved, similar to the Eid Girl, though again, this could simply have been due to one side receiving more oxygen than the other. Close to where Wind Debby 1 was found, another bog body was unearthed. This time it belonged to a middle-aged man who had been strangled with a hazel branch and then placed in the bog on a stake. Archaeologists turned to a Roman historian who stated that the Germanic tribes that lived beyond that area had the custom of punishing wrongdoers by having their executed bodies staked in bogs. With this information in hand, for a long time researchers believed that the two bog bodies belonged to an adulterous couple who were caught and punished. However, this interpretation has been reassessed following the discovery that not only were both bodies male, which of course does not mean that they were not adulterous, because same-sex relationships have existed for, well, forever. Another challenge to this interpretation is that the Wind Debby 1 bog body displayed no signs of trauma, as one would expect if the person had been executed, and that his supposed lover was 300 years older than Wind Debby 1. Thus, it is unlikely that they were an adulterous couple. Instead of presenting with any trauma, the remains suggested that the person had suffered from repeated bouts of illness or malnutrition, which finally resulted in death. The explanation for the partly shaved head is that one side of the head again was exposed to more oxygen than the other, causing the hair on one side of the head to suffer a greater rate of decay. Alternatively, the hair may have been accidentally damaged by archaeologists who were conducting the excavation. And that concludes our adventure into the bogs of Europe. Next time, I will be talking about something far less fun, that being mass infant graves. So, it'll be an interesting one. Until then, I hope you have a wonderful time and continue to learn about the history of us. Thanks for watching.